All right, the time is 7 p.m. We'll call this meeting to order. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Pileski.
Here.
Trustee Delapenna.
Here.
Trustee Domke.
Here.
Trustee Forsyth. Here. Trustee Lanisa. Trustee Perkowski.
Here.
Trustee Trejo.
Here. We have a quorum. We'll now move on to presentation of the prepared agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the
I
agenda?
will so move that, David.
Second. Thank you so much. Is there any debate? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? That motion carries. We'll now move on to village board public comment. Anyone wishing to provide a comment on a topic or an agenda item may address the village board during the public comment and public hearing segments of the village board agenda by submitting comments in advance using the online form or during the meeting. Madam Clerk, do we have any comments submitted in advance?
Two in advance. One from Annette Day of Roselle regarding chickens. She says, I would like to oppose a change in the ordinance allowing residents in incorporated Roselle to keep chickens. For the past 18 months, my neighbor has kept chickens, and even though she asked our opinion before she bought them, I told her to check the village codes, but that we were against them. She went ahead anyway and started with 25 chicks that included 2 roosters. They are kept in a cage attached to the back of her house that happens to be right outside our bedroom window. In the winter, she moved them to her garage. Someone reported her to the village, and she did get rid of the roosters, but the chickens remained. She also has 2 ducks, and unfortunately, the female was killed by some other animal while she was nesting. The screeching in the middle of the night was horrific. We have coyotes, raccoons, and now a red fox is in the area. In all fairness, she's planning to move to a home in an unincorporated area and was to move the chickens to a coop that was completed 4 months ago. It's still not finished. I listened to the planning board meeting and agree that there should be some regulations if a change passes. I ask that if a change in the code is being considered, that you think about how you wish the village to be considered, residential or farm, and what impact it will have on the neighbors. I also think the neighbors should be asked if they would mind having chickens in their vicinity.
Thank you.
The second one is from Stuart Smith of Roselle regarding overnight parking for residents of Roselle. Roselle Station Apartments built in 2020 without adequate parking for all residents, let alone guests, charge $250 for garage parking, $150 for outdoor parking, have run out of spaces, have in quotes illegally instructed / suggested to tenants to park in the Metro parking lot a quarter mile away and pay the monthly fee there. Metro PD will ticket and tow your vehicle. You cannot, however, instead park on the village streets for more than 3 nights out of 30 days after having to go online and register your vehicle. 1, why pay for a village sticker if not allowed to park on the streets? 2, why was an apartment complex allowed to be built without adequate parking for all of its tenants? 3, what recourse do residents of Roselle have at this point other than move out? 4, why are there 0 signs stating the village ordinance of no parking between 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. except on Irving Park Road that people fly past at 30+ miles per hour?
So I think a couple of things, and I'll turn over to our community development manager to just address some of the parking requirements for that project. But the village does not dictate rates or parking requirements for buildings as far as what they charge their tenants from that side of things. We do care about, obviously, if they're engaging in illegal suggestions such as parking on public property or other things that they're not able to do during certain times of the day. The one thing that's unique about those apartments is being on Irving Park Road. That is an IDOT road. That is not a Village of Roselle road. So we do not have jurisdictional control to allow for parking off that street or anything regarding that, frankly, from that matter. So I think there's a little bit of jurisdictional confusion as far as what the village can and can't dictate there. But Karen, can you comment on the parking requirements for that as it compares to other projects in other parts of the community?
So we did, the village board did grant a parking variance as part of that development. It was a planned unit development. So they were required at the time to provide 144 parking spaces. And they currently have 101. So that's a ratio of 1.4 spaces per unit. It was one of the lowest parking ratios of buildings that the village board has approved of all of our sort of like downtown condo projects. But I did look up the parking ratio for Metro 19 and that was approved at 1.32. So it's not entirely out of the realm of what the village board has approved in the past.
Thank you so much. Are there any other members of the public here tonight that wish to address the board? The record show none. We'll move on to officials and staff reports. Under my report, I have the distinct pleasure of swearing in our new Deputy Chief of Police, Robert Gates. So whenever we get to swear in anyone in any of our departments, it's always a great privilege of mine. But I think it's also unique and exciting when we get to promote some of our employees that have been with us for as long as you have. And we're excited to see your career continue to grow and flourish and for you to contribute to us in a different way. So if you'll join me at the podium. We'll do our best to do it as close as we can. Raise your right hand, repeat after me. I, Robert Gates, having been appointed to the position of Deputy Police Chief of the Village of Roselle in the counties of DuPage and Cook, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Illinois, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of Deputy Police Chief to the best of my ability. Congratulations. And would you introduce who's pinning you tonight for us?
My mom and my kids. Always standing behind me for pointing. Jason, Brian, the mayor, the board, thank you guys. Congratulations. Congratulations.
Yeah. And I know it can sound cliche, but we're one big family and we really appreciate all the work and the sacrifice that it takes to get to this point. And it also weighs heavily on you as family members who support him in that endeavor, right? Long nights, not knowing, what he could be encountering any given day. So we thank you for sharing him with us. We don't take that lightly, but also know that we're always very aggressive in making sure that all of our officers, all of our firefighters and paramedics, our public works people on the streets, we're here to fully fund and make sure that everyone has the right equipment and the right safety measures in place so that they come home safe and sound for you guys every night. So thank you for sharing it with us as well.
I like the way he ends his comments to his public speaking. That's it.
So thank you for joining us. And if you don't want to stay for the rest of the meeting, I won't take any offense at it. So if you guys would like to move on to celebrate at the station, you're more than welcome to. Otherwise, we'll continue on with our evening. So congratulations. While we clear out the room because we're so exciting here. I'll just, I'll be remiss if I didn't say happy Thanksgiving to everyone for next week. Obviously, we will be taking a hiatus for a week, and our marathon of meetings in November. So hope everyone has an opportunity to enjoy it with family and friends and just remember what keeps Roselle a great place, in that sense. And I know we'll be kicking off a very crazy holiday season as a village coming around the corner. So I'm sure some of that will be kind of covered by different people on the dais, but one thing I'll just highlight again is on December 2nd, we're going to have a holiday open house at the Klaus Center on Bryn Mawr. So join us from 9 to 10 for coffee and chocolate, and then we'll have a coffee with the boards, with the village board in the Roselle Park District at 10 a.m. that day. So with that being the case, that's all I have for my reports. Any village trustees have a report? Trustee Prokowski.
Hi, two things. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Both of them are related to the Lake Park Educational Foundation. One is that nominations for distinguished alumni are open through November 30th. So if you know any Lake Park graduates that you think are deserving of being honored as one of the distinguished alumni, the form is on the Lake Park Educational Foundation's website, and you have through the end of the month. Also related to that, they are holding a fundraiser on December 8th. The night of fine dining. So you get to go, there will be nice food, a silent auction, and then followed by this year's holiday play for Lake Park. So make sure that you buy your tickets for that. So, and that is all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Any other trustee reports tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on to the village clerk.
Well, after coffee with the board is Winterfest, and we're all gonna be there December 2nd from 2 to 5. There's gonna be live entertainment and face painting, tons of food, an adult beverage tent. So join us. It's a great way to kick off the holiday season.
It's a new addition this year, an adult beverage tent. I'm excited. Village attorney, any report? Village administrator, any report? All right, we'll move on to unfinished business. First, we have the consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine, procedural, informational, self-explanatory, or non-controversial in nature, and they'll be enacted in one motion. There'll be no discussion of these items. Tonight, we have presentation approval of the village board minutes of September 18th, 2023. Presentation approval of the village board minutes of October 23rd, 2023. Adopt a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an extension to an employee leasing agreement by and between the Village Roselle and GovTemp USA LLC. Adopt a resolution approving and authorizing the extension of an agreement by and between the Village Roselle and Municipal GIS Partners Incorporated. Adopt a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of agreement by and between the Village Roselle and Metro Paramedic Services Incorporated. And adopt a resolution approving and authorizing the Village Roselle to intervene in certain pension benefit proceedings. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk, when you're ready, a roll call, please.
Trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Delapenna,
Aye.
trustee Domke,
Aye.
trustee Forsythe,
Aye.
trustee Prokowski.
Aye.
That motion carries. We'll continue on with our agenda. We have nothing under community development tonight. Administration, trustee Forsythe.
Thank you, Mayor Pileski. I would like to move adoption of a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement by and between the Village of Roselle and the County of DuPage.
Second.
Any discussion on this item? Trustee Domke?
Quick question, do you have to remove the asbestos if you're demoing the building?
Correct.
You
And
do?
this would be done through reimbursement. So we'd incur the cost, provide receipt to the county, and they would reimburse us for the cost. Any other questions or comments? I would just like to extend a hearty thanks to the DuPage County Board, especially Member Tornatori and Chair Conroy for their support on this initiative. So I know that was one thing that was a open-ended thing with the Trinity property. So that's a nice thing that we can have those expenses covered. So we're not dealing with that issue on our own. So that being the case, could we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Forsythe,
Aye.
trustee Prokowski,
Aye.
trustee Delapenna,
Aye.
trustee Domke,
Aye.
trustee Trejo.
Aye.
That motion carries. We have nothing under fire tonight or police. Public Works, trustee Prokowski.
Thank you, Mayor Pileski. I'd like to move adoption of a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute change order number 1 for fire department tuck pointing between the Village of Roselle and Garland DBS Incorporated, Joint Purchasing Cooperative, MICPA, and OMNIA for the additional work in the amount of $2,695 and no cents. Second.
Any discussion? One of the lower change orders I've seen in a while, so that's silver lining in this situation, I suppose. Madam Clerk, could we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Prokowski,
Aye.
trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Della Penna,
Aye.
trustee Domke,
Aye.
trustee Forsythe.
Aye.
That motion carries.
I have nothing else, Mayor Pileski.
Thank you. We'll move on to finance. Trustee Delpena.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to approve the accounts payable list for November 13th, 2023 in the amount of $4,891,781.22.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, could we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Della Penna,
Aye.
trustee Domke.
Aye.
I'm sorry, trustee Forsythe,
Aye.
trustee Prokowski,
Aye.
trustee Trejo.
Aye.
That motion carries. We're gonna move on to our new business items. So we have provide direction on the fiscal year 2024 proposed budget scorecard amendments, as well as the trustee budget initiative. So I'll turn it over to the village administrator for the first half.
Thank you. So before the board is an updated scorecard. This was an increase in basically a membership for the village that came in after the proposed budget was presented to the board. So we've increased the cost for the village's kind of membership in Dugis by 13,000 to the actual amount. So that's reflected in the scorecard and kind of the underlining change in the proposed general fund surplus. I expect there's probably not too many questions around that, but if there are.
Any questions from the board? You assumed correctly.
Then the other one is the initiatives submitted by trustee Domke. The document he provided to us was included in the agenda item. And staff had some recommendations around the three items. Obviously, they're not included in the budget, and there is sufficient general fund surplus if the board wanted to do any of these projects. It would come out of that general fund difference, which is currently 111,000 about.
I'll turn over. I did open that up to everyone. I only heard from trustee Domke as far as additional requests. So why don't we take them each one at a time and give feedback so we know whether to include those in the next scorecard updates or not. So the first one is the police department star chase. Trustee Domke.
So I was talking to Chief Barretto and he was saying that it's one of the newer technologies. Our flock cameras kind of replicate some of this. So he wanted to spend some time, maybe 6 months, and look into this all the way until June. But my strategic plan was to at least put it on our agenda so that we know that that situation or that system exists. And being the technology initiator that Roselle has been, this would be one of the things that we would be in the market for, whether it be in January or maybe in June. So Chief Barretto is going to do more research and find out how this is aiding other police departments. But what it basically is, it's a dart that you shoot at a car and then you don't chase the car. And you can, track the car with the dart that's hit the car. I don't know if it's like putty or something. It's not damaging a car or anything. But it's one of those things where you now see chases going on and people are getting hurt by that. So I brought it up. Chief brought it up before saying that was out there. And, we were proactive when it came to cameras on officers. We were one of only 4 or 5 communities in DuPage that had it already. So this is another one of those things, but I just wanted to get it on record that we at least contemplate it. And also wanted to mention too, Mayor David, that, trustees can put initiatives on the budget. It doesn't mean it's accepted. It's just, we bring our ideas too, because we're kind of part of staff. So
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
what that is.
And Chief Barretto, can you just, I don't want to go out on a limb, but our current internal policies, we do not chase or pursue cars that aren't willing to stop, correct, today?
Nope. There we go. Yeah, if we, it would have to generally, it's death or great bodily harm. That's what we chase for. We don't do property crime chases, things that you see in the news there. Anything that is going to endanger the public that's at a greater rate than apprehending the subject. So if it's, for an example, it's an armed robbery at a liquor store. Yes. If it's just a simple stolen vehicle, absolutely not.
Okay, thank you so much. Any comments or direction from the board on the police department star chase?
I think it's good to study it. I mean, we had mentioned that we were one of the first ones to get the body cameras. When we got the body cameras, we got them for all the police at once, right? We didn't pick. So that was one of my concerns on this. If we put it on 2 cars, how do we know they're going to avoid one of those 2 cars? You almost have to put it on all the cars. Otherwise, you're going to have it on a car that's sitting in the parking lot when they take it from a car that's leaving going into Schaumburg. But other than that, I like the concept.
So is it included in the budget now or evaluated?
No, just continue to evaluate.
Okay, sounds good. Trustee Prokowski.
I just would like to hear more of Chief Bretto's thoughts on this. How often do you think it would be used? Is this something that, you know, you really feel is necessary? Just that type of stuff.
Yeah, so one of the reasons why I asked for some time to evaluate it is we recently installed Fleet 3, which is Axon ALPR automatic license plate reader. You read more license plates, you find more stolen vehicles, you find more stuff because it's automatic now. So what I wanted to do is be able to come back to the board and let the board know, if we see a need for this. So I would need more data before I would decide, which is what I had when I spoke with Trustee Domke. That's what I want. I wanted some time to look at it so I could give some better feedback.
Thank you. Trustee Forsythe or Trustee Trejo want to include this in the budget or continue to study it and evaluate it later?
I think evaluation and look at it mid-year.
Okay.
Evaluation.
All right. We'll flag that for evaluating it, at mid-year or at a time I would say the police chief feels ready to provide that evaluation. We'll now move down to water-filled barriers.
Well, again, this is not something that I invented. This is something that's been brought up by Chief Borzik and Chief Barretto. These things exist. We rent them, I think, right now. Is that what we're doing? So I want to just give a little quick story. I was part of a group of people that were working the Rose Fest. And we're at Rose Drive, is that what that's called? Cars were coming in and out of parking right there by the festival. We had 250 people in the beer tent. We had another 50 or 60 walking around the concourse, and many people sitting at tables, taking tickets and having booths and vendors. And there was nothing to stop a car from taking a quick right turn and hitting the gas pedal. So I know that when we have like a Rose Parade or something, we do have some barriers, or when we have some of the Taste of Roselle, we have some barriers that we rent. And then I think we charge. Are we charging the people that are running those events for the rental of those barriers, or are we doing it on our own dime? I don't know that answer.
When appropriate, we pass along the cost to the special event sponsor.
So having these Jersey walls, now, if you're renting them, and I want to just say from my looking at the Rose Festival, you didn't have enough. Now, whether that was because the ones that were running the festival didn't want to pay for it, or there was a very insecure place there in this world. So I know that the chiefs have been talking about these barriers. And then they said we could probably get some, and then we would provide those for the events. And the people who are putting on these events at a lot of times on their own dime and making Roselle a place to come are paying a lot of money for these barriers that we could be providing for them and not charge them. So it kind of boiled down to, is it time for us to start buying these barriers? And then you buy the ones that you can fill with water or sand, so you don't need a forklift to put them down. They don't weigh that much. And I just came from an event today in Bartlett that had them all around the place, and they were perfect for that. So anyway, that's why I brought it up, because the chiefs have been talking about it. And I know sometimes they don't want to bring some of these things up because they're being a little more, how would you say it, austere with their budgeting. And I'm bringing it up as a proactive thing. That's it. That's my story, and I'm going to stick to it.
Okay. I don't want to put you on the spot, but our Public Works Director, Karen Young, do you want to discuss it, since it'd be ultimately Public Works who'd have to implement the storage and installation of those, and just kind of give us an understanding of what that would look like?
Sure. Currently, we rent them. The vendor brings them out. They are filled by The fire department, if we were to purchase them, we would have to store them outdoors. We have no indoor storage for that no quantity of material. And have found that currently renting them would be more economical for us and also from a staff standpoint. So as we move to that number of barriers, it's going to require us for these larger events to start bringing our staff in from other divisions within Public Works to be able to facilitate that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board on? Oh,
Just add
yeah,
one thing.
sure.
Let's just say one thing I have to say though, safety. So regardless of cost, I hope that we have our events safer with more barriers, whether we provide them or we rent more of them. And that we can somehow help some of these people who are putting on these fests to not have to pay for every single barrier. But I'm going to tell you one thing, the safety is so important nowadays. You have to be proactive. You can't be reactive all the time. You can't be with one person that said, gee, I never thought they would do that in our town.
I do appreciate your sentiment. I do just want to say, I think all of our events are incredibly safe to the public. I don't want to put people in a panic. I think that we've done a fantastic job putting in security plans and safety plans in place for every event. I know one thing that the board has taken action on to hopefully help events going forward is allowing us to cover the cost of public safety. So that's a huge expense that's going to be lifted off a lot of these groups organizing. So it shouldn't be as hard for them to do it. But I think based on what we're hearing, or I'm at least hearing from staff, is we could rent more barricades. That's not the problem. Renting is still more cheaper for the organizations in the long run than us installing them ourselves, because it would incur a higher cost for us to do it versus renting someone.
I just add one other thing.
Sure.
You could do this in a 3-year plan. You could do this in a 5-year plan.
I think our labor costs are the big thing. It's not so much the barricades, but our labor to put it together is going to cost more. Trustee Prowse?
Well, also just to go off of what Karen says, the storage of these things, you don't necessarily just want them outside 365 days out of the year. So, but how does that affect their life? How often then are we gonna have to buy them? It just sounds like it's more economical to continue what we've been doing. So.
Other thoughts from the board? Do we want to include this in the budget or?
No.
No.
Okay. We'll punt on that one, and then fire department drone.
Okay, so this is the last one of the three. Whether or not they could share the police one, if that's the possibility, that would be even, better than my proposal. But a drone has the possibilities of being a tool for police, fire, and public works. And so the justification for having a drone we have 2/3 more people could be using it. And needless to say, with the high rises, fire up in that side, you'd need to know where the heat spot is on the roofs, so you don't send somebody to the wrong room. The drone can do that. The drone can for public works. You don't use it for enforcement, but you could you could see if there's, without sending somebody out in the car, you could go look for potholes and find out where they're at and log those in on the record, and you would be able to you'd save some labor not going out in a car. So there's some advantages to these other two departments. I put down the idea that if the police drone was so sophisticated that it would be not good for the fire department, I added a drone for the fire department. That's where that originated from. So Chief got me the price on the drone, and there's some significant savings on training or becoming a pilot. So it became only a $4,000 item, but it's something to consider. Whether you approve it or not, I just like the idea of having it in front of us.
And correct me if I'm wrong, we have budget for an additional drone in police for the budget for next year, correct?
Yes, one large and then 2 additional
Practice training drones.
Correct.
So 3 drones total, but.
So
And
we'll have
multiples of
6, I
variants, so.
think, total. 2 that are basically deployed. The other ones are used for less expensive training.
Got it.
And I imagine the fire department could get trained on those same drones, right?
That is our goal, is to determine that they can do that. I believe the functionality of our police zone or drone fits the needs of fire. I think it has thermal, but Mark or Tim can speak to that.
Yeah, And talking with Chief Barretto, hey, there we are.
Maybe we need to buy mics.
Yeah.
Go on.
We're gonna work with the police department, with their second drone. And, you know, they have the policy in place, at that time will let us, to get our pilots trained and go ahead and practice with their training drones, then utilize their drone if we need to in an incident. And then at the mid-year budget, if we come to the conclusion that it's beneficial for us to have it, then we'll come back and push for it at that time. But this time we think that there's enough resources we can share between the police and the fire.
What is the use case? I know Wayne had mentioned a couple of things, but from your professional standpoint, what's the use of a drone in fire?
New mics, we're gonna do.
There we go.
New mics, yeah, with
I can
the-
write that up.
with fire, the couple of things we see is, large buildings, getting that, bird's eye view of, fire and where the heat signatures are. And then obviously, with having Ember and the search and rescue, combining the drone with the search and rescue gives us another tool, to help, with the tracking of, lost persons and just gives us a additional tool to use for those instances. So, we've seen, especially with the search and rescue strike team, the combinations of the K9s and the drones being very successful in being able to track those victims that we're looking for. So it's definitely no different than the police. There's distinct uses for it. And we see it. We just think that the police is a little bit farther ahead of us. And so we're going to kind of rely on their expertise and their policy so we can develop ours.
Great.
So it sounds to me like you can use the one that the police department's gonna order, but is there any other technology that would be better for the fire department to have that could be added to that before we do order it?
I think the technology is obviously, we're looking at the infrared technology that we would have on the drone. The police have a version of that. We'd be looking at something that's a little bit of more detailed for the fire. And then probably drop some other things off, like we don't need the speakers on the drone to make announcements. More of ours is for surveillance and looking at the fire scenes.
Okay, thank you.
Consensus of the board on this one? Head nods, that's not an answer.
Sounds like it can be punted.
Defer?
Yes.
Well, defer with the idea that we now have expanded our thought on using the drones for other departments.
Yeah, I think defer, and I also think if there is the ability to order something that with the police drone to add whatever fire needs to that, it probably makes
Yeah.
sense.
I think if anything, I would say, I would be curious if we maybe need to develop a more comprehensive drone fleet policy. So that way we can maybe station these as more universal assets. And then that way, if one department needs more than they have available on hand, they can borrow it from their adjacent partners and whatnot. So maybe we need to just look at fleet management from a drone vehicle perspective. So I'm sad Tom's not here for me to say that, but
I agree though.
this will become obsolete at some point, and at what point does that technology get outdated and we have to update that drone just like we would any vehicle, right? So they're not one-time purchases, but all right. Well, I know we didn't necessarily move forward on them, but I do appreciate, I think we had a good conversation. That's the most important thing here. So if nothing else, I do appreciate you submitting those forward. Trustee Dalkey.
The trustees too, the next budget time, you've had something that you've talked to your departments about or something, and you know, put it on the wish list. The worst thing that can happen is we don't do it, but at least it's brought into the public.
Absolutely. Well, staff has their direction. Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Thank you so much. We'll move on to discussion on prohibiting the sale of products containing THC, acetate ester, or THCO in the village of Roselle. So I'll go ahead and invite up Chief Barretto to kind of give us some discussion. And while he's coming up, there's been a lot of talk around different products, which include Delta 8s and Delta 9s in the news that can create issues for the public. There was recently a task force set up that allowed Bloomingdale and Glendale Heights to kind of have a conversation and kind of look at the best way to kind of start to regulate these. And so we have a number of smoke shops in the town that some sell these types of products. And so I think in keeping with what we've been doing to try to keep our code and ordinances up to date with the most current new way to indulge. I think we wanted to kind of bring something for the board to discuss and consider as far as maybe some new regulatory enforcement. So with that being the case, Chief, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to present today to the board. So THCO, acetate ester, it's THC is a naturally occurring in the cannabis sativa plant. And the Industrial Hemp Act in 2018 said that if Delta-9 THC that was in cannabis was less than 0.3%, then it was considered hemp. So what that means is it created a loophole because if the Delta-8, Delta-9, if it was lower 0.3 or less, then it's not going to be regulated. It's considered hemp, and then it doesn't. The Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act doesn't apply. What this means, like I said, is if it's lower than 0.3%, then it's legal because it's hemp. And so what we're seeing happen is that unregulated, the industry is unregulated because these companies are regulated. And they're synthetically concentrating the Delta-8 and Delta-9 THC using sometimes household chemicals. So sometimes what'll happen when they do that is that they will create this synthetic, and it turns from THC, which is naturally occurring, as I said, to THCO, which is synthetic. So the consumption of THCO, one of the problems with that is when consumed, sometimes it causes hallucinations, cause vomiting, tremors, anxiety, dizziness, confusion, loss of consciousness. You have, I was talking to a officer from Hanover Park, and he had mentioned that in one of their schools, they had a kid who actually brought a vape that had THCO, and then he exhibited some of these signs, and then they had to call the fire department to take care of him. He survived and everything, but it was extremely scary. So what happens is right now, THCO, currently the state law allows possession of cannabis and all Delta derivatives by people who are 21 or older. Has to be purchased through a dispensary, of course. But Delta-8 and Delta-9 THCO, I keep saying that so that you understand it's synthetic. It's not THC, it's THCO, so it's a man-made synthetic. They're unregulated by the state. Importantly, also, the Department of Justice says that THCO isn't the same thing as Delta-8 THC and Delta-9, so that kind of gives a lie to the argument. Hey, it's all, all comes from the plant. It's all, it's just weed. It's not. It's something based on the Department of Justice. It's actually something that's, it's not the same thing. The concern that we have is that these products are sometimes sold in stores. Companies package them because they are not regulated, and it's ways that sometimes can appeal to children. So gummies, chocolates, cookies, things like that, and things where you can actually get them, and they're easily grabbed up because it's not regulated. So the board now, what I was looking at is you have two options. You can leave it the way it is currently, which is it's unregulated and we don't do anything, and we look for movement at the state level. Cannabis lobby, hemp lobby is pretty powerful. You have a couple of people in the state house that are looking to make some changes on this, but it could be a long way off. Or we could enact an ordinance that prohibits the sale of products that contain Delta-8 and Delta-9 THCO. Dispensaries would not be affected. So just these other companies. And importantly for the village, it doesn't affect the legality of the possession of these products. We're really going at it from a health and safety aspect. We're not going at it from a legality. So possession wouldn't be affected, but the sale of the product would be affected. I know that the towns around us, I looked at the towns around us. Addison recently passed an ordinance that bans the selling, the giving away, or the delivering of THCO. Glendale Heights is considering or has already passed a similar ordinance. I got the ordinance from Bloomingdale, didn't look all the way through it. I know that they're on board also. So what we're looking for is direction on the board, so I can work with the attorney and put together a ban on selling this. And once again, possession 21 and older, we haven't changed that, but it is selling it at these establishments is what we're looking at controlling.
Thank you so much. So I'll open up for board discussion. I think, there's a lot to consider here, but I think there's a lot of loopholes out there right now. And I think this is just something that I wanted to have the board discuss because I think at the end of the day, there's balance to things, right? We want to keep people safe and whatnot. And I think that's where those, dispensaries are very heavily regulated and protected. And that way people should know and have good faith that they're getting good, healthy product for themselves there, depending on, whatever you prefer to do. But these THCOs, the synthetic products are kind of following this loophole where it might not come from the most legitimate source though. Trustee Prokowski?
So yeah, kind of going off of that, Chief Barretto and I actually were talking over the weekend, and kind of the way he kind of explained it to me and we were going back and forth on is that since this is unregulated, it's almost like the equivalent of like moonshine weed being sold in a legitimate store. So the fact that it's unregulated is one of the things that causes a lot of the potential safety issues. So at this point, until we kind of get that direction from above, I would be fully in support of banning the sale of it. The same way we wouldn't allow a restaurant to sell, moonshine to their customers or a liquor store. So.
Trustee Domke?
Who's selling this now? Because the dispensaries are not selling it.
I didn't check with the dispensary because it's legal and it's regulated as.
So they could still sell it.
Yeah, for sure. It's,
So who are the ones that will be selling it that we're after here, that we're trying to stop?
yeah, so vape shops, gas stations, yeah, things like that. Because like I said, there's a loophole. So whenever there's a loophole,
But
We'll
even
find
if it's the THC, that has to go through regulations, right?
yeah, so that was the thing is that the way they get away with it is that it's not regulated, it's THCO, and then it's actually hemp, it's
Oh,
hemp. So then they say, hey, it's not really, this is not really, it's less than 0.3%, but really they're kind of jumping it up with synthetic chemicals.
So I would concur with Trustee Burkowski. I would regulate it until we get more direction from others.
I would as well. Trejo?
Just a quick question. So the products that the dispensary offers, though, are they fundamentally different than what's at a gas station or a vape shop, or the current products at a vape shop and gas station would also be sold at dispensaries? Like, is there like different brands that are more sold at dispensaries versus other places?
Yeah, so I didn't look at, what brands would be sold and, at the dispensary compared to what would be sold at, vape shops and things like that. The way that I looked at it was that if you're a licensed dispensary with a basically a charter from the state and you've worked with the village to be regulated, you don't want to sell products that are going to jeopardize your license. So we would be looking at it from the vape shops and things like that. We'd be going after them because they're not regulated to sell this type of stuff. I'm sorry, one more thing. I apologize.
Oh, go ahead.
No, one more thing. So all of the ordinances that I looked at from all the other towns also take it from the same angle also, is that they talk about THCO and they regulate THCO, but they don't touch all dispensaries. They leave their dispensaries out of it, and that's very specific in all of their ordinances. We would do the same thing.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think also the way that you handle product differently from a dispensary to a vape shop, there's a lot more accountability and tracking of the product and what's done with disposal of it properly versus a vape shop, which I don't think there's anything that dictates how they would be able to track or dispose of that product. So.
I'm for adoption of an ordinance prohibiting the sale.
Okay. So Trustee Chair, any questions on your
No.
part, or you want to move forward with?
Oh, yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, you got direction. So let's go ahead and draft an ordinance then to prohibit the sale of THCO in the Village of Roselle.
Thank you for your time.
Emphasis on the O. Thank you. Smoking lounges. So
What synergy is. Move right into-
speaking of that, yeah, we'll have Community Development Manager Karen Bricks up to present. So.
All right. So Plan Commission held a public hearing earlier this month, I guess last week, about smoking lounges. So as part of the zoning ordinance update, the smoking lounges were added to the definition of smoke shop, which made them a permitted use in the business district. So B2, B3, B4, and B5. In the previous ordinance, they were a special use in all of those zoning districts. So this wasn't something that had been brought up specifically in our public hearing for the update and in discussions with the working group. So I wanted to bring it back on its own separate public hearing to make sure that everyone was on the same page of how the village wanted to regulate smoking lounges, hookah lounges, that type of thing. So I've included, the proposed definitions that would be changed. They voted to recommend, making it a special use again in B2, B3, B4, and B5, and then separating the smoke shop from the smoke lounge and definitions to make that a little bit more clear. And we, currently have one, special use for a smoke lounge, at Tobacco Oasis on Irving Park Road. So they've already been granted it and I believe are in compliance with their special use ordinance. So they're either grandfathered in or they're still good to go.
Right. Any questions from the board? Or direction to move forward?
Makes sense.
Yes.
I quit smoking 30 years ago, so it's irrelevant to me.
Okay, so you've got consensus to move forward with it as the Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed. Thank you. Anything else you need from us? All right, thank you. We'll now move on to our last one, chicken keeping regulations. So I know we had a spirited debate at the last meeting. Trustee Trejo and Trustee Delphin, I think you missed out. So welcome to the fray. And I think we made some changes based on the feedback that we had. So I'll turn it over to you, Karen, to discuss and where we need additional answers.
Yeah, so I went back and rewatched the discussion just to make sure that I got it straight. And I think we're still a little unclear, at least from a staff perspective, on the regulations we want to include. So I've included all of the things that we've previously discussed at the sort of top of the memo. So number of chickens permitted. P&Z recommended a maximum of 5 and no roosters. I believe there was a general consensus to stay consistent with that recommendation. Only owner occupied dwellings are permitted to have chickens. I think there was consensus on that as well. And then the main things that we had spirited discussions about were one was registration and fee. So we could require homeowners to register with the village so that staff has a list of properties for enforcement purposes. And the Illinois Department of Agriculture also has a list basically where you can sign up at no cost and register your property so that they can track disease and illnesses. So it's more from a public health perspective. And so staff recommends registration with both, just from an enforcement perspective and a public health perspective. And then we do not recommend a fee at this time, even though the Planning and Zoning Commission did.
Can we pause there and just discuss that? Because then there's a lot of things and it's easy for us to get kind of tangled up. So as far as the number of chickens, the restriction on no roosters, it has to be owner occupied, no renters, and then a kind of registration of the village and the Illinois Department of Agriculture, no fee. How does the board feel about those directions?
Okay with both.
I'm okay with them.
Trustee Prokowski?
So I'm okay with them, and I kind of wanted to explain a bit more why, I guess, because it's, I think, going to be just important for this discussion in general. I think one of the things about this is there's a fear that people are looking at this through kind of, even though it's the Department of Agriculture, an agricultural perspective. Keeping chickens is not farming. This is no more farming than growing tomatoes in your backyard and eating them, or having a dog or a cat. So this is a pet and likely going to be a pet in most people's eyes. We put limits on how many dogs and cats you can have. There's a requirement, for a rabies vaccine for your dog. So to have that registration with the Department of Agriculture to kind of keep track of their health, this is something I think that does kind of keep it in line with that. But I do think it's something that, to view it as an agricultural, you're not going to produce enough eggs with 5 chickens to make this an agricultural concern any more than, a garden plot in your backyard means you're farming cucumbers. So it's a hobby, it's a pet. So it's just kind of, yes, I'm in favor of this, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay, Trustee Domke?
would like to hear other trustees that weren't at our meeting.
Yeah, it's fine. Trustee Trejo is the last one.
Yeah, so the question I have is, okay, so I agree. So number one, I'm not necessarily supporting chicken.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we can get to that at the end, but I want to make sure we're talking about the right
Yeah,
regulation.
no,
if that
totally
makes
tracks.
sense.
So the require homeowners to register with Illinois Department of Agriculture, that's fine. Now, are we requiring them to bring in proof that they registered before? Or are they gonna register with us, then go register and then come prove it that they registered with the Department of Agricultural? Because to me, if there's a lot of like back and forth between staff, I think there should be at least a fee for the first time. Not necessarily an annual fee, but if there is sort of some of this checking, verifying that they registered and that kind of thing, like a rabies shot, if I get, I don't have to bring it to the village, so there's no staff time for the village if I have a dog. So to me, I think it makes sense to have a one-time fee, but not an annual fee. The minimum of 5 seems fine to me. Only owner occupied dwellings. I could go either way on that. And I think that is.
Yeah, those are the three, so.
Can I address one of those?
Sure.
So I mean, I guess we could take care of your question, Lee, by just telling them they have to register with Department of Agriculture first. Bring that in, and then we take it from there. Wouldn't be any extra time than if they did.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I want to understand like
Yeah.
the mechanics of everything, because if it is taking some staff time, I think it's not unreasonable to charge a fee. I mean, it's no different than a business license. I mean, what did the businesses get for the business license? So I think it's, we have to balance that. If there is some, exposure to staff in terms of you guys needing to do something, I don't think it's unreasonable to charge a one-time fee.
All right, trustee Domke.
Yeah, I would
Just
do,
those three.
I would do that fee thing, So, okay.
I think a one-time, I mean, where we're going right now, though, it sounds like it's different from where we were at last meeting. So talking about a one-time fee and now coupling that with the Department of Agriculture registration. We've refined this a bit, so I think we got to give ourselves a pat on the back for that.
So I think the plan has got all the parameters to make it a good thing in Roselle. But my problem is, I have to ask is, do you really want to be enforcing the calls that are going to be coming in about chickens like you just saw in what Amanda read? That was just one letter. I mean, once we start putting these in, are you ready to have, like, you got enough problems with zoning sometimes. Now you're gonna have a problem with these calls coming in. The chickens are getting out of the coops. The people are not, they're not managing it correctly. So I'm fearful, I will say, I'm fearful of doing this. Also, I'm paying a lot of taxes for my properties in Roselle. Do I want to have a chicken coop next door to me? And my answer, quite frankly, was no, as a person. But as the village, as long as that chicken coop's somewhere else, yeah, it doesn't bother me so much. So I'm torn, okay, because personally, I wouldn't move to a town that has chickens. That would be like moving out to the country. And then the other thing, and I'm being negative here, but I'm still in favor, if it's gonna pass, that you've done a good job of having control, with a couple of caveats to that. Number one is, Mayor David, I would hope that you would have it as like liquor licenses, where you would only issue a certain amount. And even in a preliminary year, like let's say 2024, where we allow chickens, that David would put a cap on it. And then we'll see how it is in 2024, that we don't roll this out and 150 chicken coops come up. So that's the other thing. And then the last thing I'm just pouring out my heart right now. What are we gonna do with ducks? What are we gonna do with hamsters or whatever? I mean, not hamsters, but what are we gonna do with other animals that now we have a precedent? Chickens, why can't we have turkeys? Why can't we have the ducks? How do you go and do one thing and say no to other things? So those are my laments, and I'm gonna turn it over to the board, and then I'll see what
Okay.
everybody has to say.
I can
Well, one thing I just want to say, because I would say this to anyone that comes before us, but I do want to remind you, you only spend 10% of your property tax to the village of Roselle. So I want to throw it to anyone else.
Well, the other 90% gotta be out there listening.
I will just say one thing though is, the board can decide whatever they want to do. I do not want to become the chicken czar and deciding which families get a chicken license this year and which families don't. So I will just say, I think, as opposed to liquor licenses, I think this is a little bit different. And I think To your point, I understand your concern about wanting to try to have some control mechanism, but I don't know how I could qualifyingly decide who deserves a
Well,
license
we
or
could
not.
Say
so.
how many we're going to allow the first year.
So-
I just my personal preference, so that's all. So go ahead, Karen. Sorry.
So from an enforcement perspective, we're already dealing with people having chickens when they're not currently allowed to have chickens. So the person who submitted public comment, they
How many?
were forced to go through. We've had 2 or 3 just
Two or
this
three. Well,
year.
with this passing, you could have 24 or 36. So that's all I'm saying.
Or you could have 4.
We could
We don't know.
Yeah, so it's already an enforcement concern. And then, I had another point, but I
It's
lost
fine.
it.
Trustee Burkowski. And then I want to move on to the other things that I think get a little bit more into the nitty gritty as far as setbacks and coop size, because I think that those are important requirements, but I do want to let you finish.
So going off of trustee Trejo, yeah, the one time, and not even a one-time fee, but that there is actually some value as mentioned in there. For example, when you get your rabies tag, yeah, the village doesn't collect that money, but you do pay a fee and that goes to the county because the county is the
Right.
one regulating that. So that does make sense to have that. For trustee Domke, I kind of feel like what they always say in grad school is you're kind of getting into what about the price of sugar in Zimbabwe material or area here? We don't know how many there could be asking for this. The regulations that we're looking to put on means that most of the village probably would not be able to have chickens as it is. And kind of going back to the pet kind of, not even analogy, the pet scenario, you already have the concern about what about when dogs get out? What about, I mean, obviously it's not a big of an issue with a cat, but you already have kind of these ideas related to the animals that people own and care for as part of this. So it is, you know, I guess there is a kind of a line that does have to be drawn. What poultry are we going to potentially allow? But there are already regulations in place saying that you can have some pets, you cannot have others. The one I kind of always kind of go to is you can't have a turtle less than 4 inches in length. There are laws in place kind of already drawing lines, so it makes sense for us to draw a line as well.
So I know we're starting to dabble into should we or should we not, but I do want to hit setbacks and coop size. So Karen, can you give us just a quick summary of those and we can open up to those or any
Yeah.
general concerns?
There was general consensus, I think, that the coops and runs should only be allowed in the rear yard. So not in like the corner side yard or the side yard or the front yard. And that your yard must be fenced. And then some of the spirited debate was about setbacks. So planning and zoning originally recommended 15 feet from all property lines and 30 feet from the nearest primary dwelling. So I'm looking for some consensus on those requirements.
And did you do coop size? Sorry.
So P and Z recommended the size of a shed, which is 120 square feet. I think based on the previous discussion, that generally people felt that that was a little bit too big. So the draft ordinance from the village attorney currently says 4 square feet per chicken, which I think is more in line of how people actually have chickens. So that would be the staff recommendation.
So setbacks and coop size. I'm personally happy with the coop size change because I think 20 square foot coop sounds a lot more reasonable to me than 120 square foot. So
I really struggle with a 15-foot high one though. I mean, if someone wanted to build one, I mean, that's 3/4 of the way up the side of my house.
Yeah, I think it was just mimicking our accessory structure requirements. So
do we need to specify height given the square foot change then at that point?
I discussed that with Brian. I think that'll regulate itself.
Is there a limit? So Tom, since you brought it up, what would you, if you had to pull a number, say no greater than?
I don't know, what's the ceiling height, 8 feet, something like that? I don't think I'd want it much higher than that. And if we're only, I mean, while we're on that same topic of coop size, I mean, if we're gonna only allow a max of 4 square feet per chicken and 5 chickens, we don't need to get anywhere near 120.
No, well, that thing is, I think we strike the 120. You're now talking about 4 square feet per chicken, which I think it feels much more reasonable to me. And I think we don't need to, I think it's the same issue with the 120 square feet. If we shouldn't lead the witness in terms of building a giant structure they don't need. And I think we should potentially come in with a more reasonable. So I think 8 feet's a good one, or 9 feet. I don't know structure. I'm not a structural person to know what's the right
No-
height rather.
No
So,
5-story chicken condos.
yeah. Prokowski.
All right, it's funny, back in football, you just called me by my last name. For that max of 4 square feet per chicken, I'm sure you guys already thought of this, but like, we should have language in there, maybe just setting that rather than, because like, what if somebody has 4 chickens, then one of the chickens dies and they have a 16 square foot coop? Is that suddenly an illegal coop? So I just would rather.
No more than 20 square feet.
Yeah, I'd rather cross our. What is that?
More the other way.
It's the minimum.
No,
that's-
if someone sets it up for 4 chickens, 1 dies, you'd still be all right with.
Yeah.
The 3. It's the other way, say, oh, I'm only gonna have 4 chickens, and all of a sudden they have 5.
Oh, because the language says a max of 4 square feet per chicken.
So then, right, so if you said, the way you're reading it, I think it's correct, is 4. So they come in, they say, oh, I only have 4 chickens. 1 dies, so now 16 feet, they only need 12, but they have a 16-foot coop. They're still legal, right? That's fine. I worry about the other way.
If they added a chicken.
If they added a chicken, is where I would worry.
To reiterate from last time, I'm not a chicken expert, so it's entirely possible that the word max there is not the correct usage of the word.
So I guess if the intent's 4 square foot per chicken, I think, what if we just set a maximum of 20 square feet? Because that would be, I think we just make that easier on all of us. We don't have to do chicken math. To your point, I just think it puts us in a gray area, and I think flock, you hope they're healthy, but you never know, right? So,
You could even add 5 more feet just to make sure that they don't.
yeah, I think the intent is 120 square feet was too much, right? So I think we're trying to bring it.
5, yeah.
Just set
More
the number
reasonable.
at 25 or 30 and just leave it.
Yeah.
Trustee Trejo.
I mean, speaking of all these numbers that are thrown around, I mean, I feel like none of us are like chicken experts here. So I just Googled real quick. It said like average chicken coops should be at least 4 feet tall. You should give chickens at least 18 inches of headroom. So I think we should get like some actual science behind like the chicken size, the coop sizes. Like we should ask somebody, veterinarian, animal control, someone to kind of figure out like what this should be.
Yeah,
I do think 15 feet, yeah, to your point, there's no way like I would support a 15-foot high one.
I think in terms of height, it'll regulate itself. No one's going to Home Depot and finding a 15-foot high
2x4s are pretty.
chicken coop.
I mean,
Like a
someone I know built a
prefab
chicken
chicken-
coop, so I would
Right.
rather have it regulated.
Okay.
And were other communities, did they have regulations on the coop size from our survey? I'm trying to recall.
Not the specific that I remember.
I think this is something more unique maybe to Roselle that we're doing here than other communities that have
Mhm.
allowed it. So
And I just think we need to
Trustee-
take the point of view too of the animal welfare. We can't just say like, oh,
Yeah.
let's just pick a, number from the sky and say it's 8 feet tall or 9 feet tall. I mean, we have to consider that as well when we draft the ordinance.
Trustee Donkey.
My son lives next door to a house. He lives in Akron, Ohio, and there's a chicken coop next door. And it's a small coop. It's not very high, but they also have chicken wire, of course, fenced in area for the chickens to walk around a little bit in the yard. Are you going to allow that?
Yeah, that's the run portion of it.
Okay.
That's called a.
And it has to be in the rear yard only.
So therefore, they can let the chickens out in the daytime to whatever and go back into the coop at night, right? Kind of.
Yeah, I believe that's how it works.
And then I think, now this is just me, but I think if you keep the chickens off the ground, you don't have to have a heated chicken coop in the winter. That they've got enough feathers and whatever to live, but if you keep them out of the wind and you keep them off the ground, which freezes, from what I understand from some farmers in Michigan, that's all you need to keep a chicken coop. You don't have to heat it.
Well, and I think to the point that's been raised about ceiling height, the more ceiling space you have, the less you can trap heat in the coop. So you want a lower ceiling height by design. So that way they fill it and they can keep it warmer than they would if it was,
That's why you don't build a huge thing because there's no furnace.
some, I will say, have a walkable area where you can stand in to collect the eggs. So I think that's where ceiling height can be tricky, but you might see some.
Oh, and one other thing, can I say? Well,
Absolutely. This is discussion. Go for it. Trust me.
so how do you stop comfort chickens and porta potties in the backyard like?
It's a business, so that is no longer a pet or a keeping for domesticated purposes. That's a business, and so you need to have a business license. And you have to register with the village, and those would be things that we would take through that process, I would say. So
Mhm. Well, if they're not charging any money, is it a business?
Yes, we still require like nonprofits and stuff to register with us.
Okay.
So I'm hearing no issues on the setback requirements this time around. So it sounds like, I don't want to paraphrase here, but it sounds like we're comfortable switching to maybe a maximum of a coop of 25 square feet to give a buffer based on what I was hearing in conversation. And I'm going to go back to probably saying a height not to exceed 6 feet.
Make it 8. It's not gonna hurt anything, make it 8 feet.
Okay, not to exceed 8 feet.
You can buy 8 feet, 8-foot 2x4s very easily.
So that's what I'm hearing right now from that angle of it. The other, I'm just double checking before I venture into new territory.
I mean, again, just to reiterate, I think we should get someone that actually knows more about chickens.
We're not making, the
just
whole
need
point
to-
is
right.
to decide if we're drafting an ordinance or not, and then we can get that ordinance validated before we take any vote on it. So new topics, do we want to prohibit the sale of eggs? And currently, based on research, the state does allow butchering of chickens if they've been owned for 30 days or more. So do we want to prohibit the on-site butchering of chickens? So I have a hunch, I know what the board's gonna say, but what say you? Trustee Forsythe?
No on-site butchering.
Okay,
And yeah, we can prohibit the sale of eggs.
okay. Prohibit both. Trustee Domke?
Prohibiting the sale of eggs because they're not commercial, right?
Yep. So no eggs and no butchering. All right.
Well, I might have a chicken for Thanksgiving. I tell you, I'm getting pretty hungry right here, so. No butchering.
Only if it's owned for more than 30 days.
Yeah, you would have to own, you would have had to have that chicken for a while now, so.
Wait,
Trustee
No,
Delphine?
no on both.
Go on both. Trustee Trejo?
no on both is fine.
Trustee Prokowski?
No, on both.
All right, so we've got direction there. So I think we've got the framework potentially for an ordinance. And I think, to Trustee Domke's point, he kind of started us on this path. So what's the consensus of the board? Do we want to bring this back as an ordinance to be voted on? We could have it reviewed by animal experts to make sure that it is in keeping with their proper maintenance, but is the board supportive of an ordinance being actually passed, or is this dead on arrival?
So with these parameters, I'm fine with it.
Still undecided.
Still undecided
I'm for it.
for it? Okay, Trustee Prokowski?
For it.
Okay. And I know you've made your points expressed. Do you want to share anything else, Trustee Domke, before we?
No, right now, I'm just in a quandary.
Okay, that's fine.
What I would vote right now.
I think one thing I would say is in addition, so let's go forward in drafting an ordinance with the consensus of the board. So the changes that I have documented here are we would have a one-time registration fee for the initial registration. We are updating the coop size maximums to 25 square feet and 8 feet high. And then we would include the prohibiting sales of eggs and butchering. So those would be kind of the changes that I see to the ordinance as it is, keeping the 5 limit, no roosters. We'll get this reviewed. And if we could also do some cursory analysis, I think this might be helpful for you, Trustee Domke, and just in general for the board to be aware and for the public. Could we do some quick GIS analysis? I'm not expecting it to be 100% accurate, but what percent of properties based on their site configuration would qualify even for a chicken coop? Is that fair? Do we have that ability with GIS? Or could we wing it?
I think it's gonna be basically any single family home.
Okay.
8,000.
Oh, I raise a question here or raise a comment here. I looked around in my neighborhood and I mean, if you have those setbacks of 30 feet and 15 feet from each lot line, some houses can barely get it, but that's going to be right in the middle of your backyard.
Right.
I don't know how many people are going to want a chicken coop right in the middle of their backyard. So I think it's going to be more limited than you think. Most people want it in the back corner.
We don't know, do we?
We don't, but
So I think if we could just do a cursory glance, and if that's the case, that's fine. We can make that stipulation that in most cases it's permitted, but it would have to be literally smack dab in the middle of the lot. I think that's just good information for everyone to kind of understand and know. So.
Sure.
I have to say one more thing.
Absolutely, trustee Trejo.
Another, the thing that didn't come up, and maybe it came up last time, but just another thing that I saw online, just looking at this, is they're saying that coop should be at least 8 to 12 inches off the ground. So I think that should also be something that we should have reviewed to see what that should be. And that should be part of the process, I think, for staff to go out and make sure that from an animal welfare perspective, that these are being complied with. And that's why, like the earlier point about the fee, that's what I think we should like make sure that we have a comprehensive, what are we doing for the fee and how much that fee should be.
Well, I would say, the structure itself would have to be permitted, so that would be through our shed ordinance. So you're spending a couple $100s on a permit through that process to have someone come out and inspect. So, but the height requirement, we should, or the, I don't know what you want to call that, but we should probably take that into consideration. But we can probably provide, like we would with sheds, patios, other stuff like that, a kind of a spec sheet for chicken coops.
Yeah, like
It would also only be $125,
Thank you, $125, over 100.
whatever that should be.
not
should
hundreds.
Be in there.
Okay.
All right, perfect. Thank you for the spirited conversation. I think we got through a lot of.
I think the Daily Herald is here, David.
They're always watching, Wayne. They're always watching.
You're always watching.
With that being the case, do we have any village board public comment tonight? So is there any member of the public that wishes to address the board at this time? Oh, yep. If you are, come on up, just state your name for the record and just make sure you're speaking into the microphone so our viewers at home can hear you as well.
Rich White, I live over in Catalpa. In regards to the chickens, you people have any idea, have you ever worked on a farm
Oh.
where their chickens were raised? The stench is horrendous. The ammonia, you don't want to breathe it. It's terrible. And as far as 8 feet high, I can only have a fence 6 feet high. Why? Why go 8? Why go 15? That's what I read in the Herald. And I didn't even know about this until I read it in the Herald. And this is just not a good idea. Chickens belong on farms, hogs, geese, ducks, whatever. They're farm animals. That's where they belong, on a farm. If people want to have their comfort chickens, move to Kane County where there's more open land and buy a farm. Think about it. You're going to have a lot of upset people in this village. As I'm thinking about developing a recipe for free range grilled therapy chicken. That's about all I have to say, but believe me, you're opening up a can of worms. You're going to have a lot of people upset, including me. I'm thinking about doing a petition. So have a good day.
Thank you so much. Sir, in the back, you had a public comment as well? Yeah, coming up. Just state your name for the record if you don't mind.
My name's Stuart Smith. I'm actually the individual that wrote the question about parking.
Thank you.
So as far as legality is concerned, are you allowed to park at Metro if you're not an overnight commuter?
If you have a permit, you should be, right?
If you pay for parking, then you're not subject, one, to Metro Police. It's the Roselle Police Department that enforces parking at our Metro train station. So your comment mentioned Metro PD and towing. I don't know if we initiated that towing. It's typically not our policy to just tow a vehicle. It's to usually. Okay, that's probably news to us. Yeah. I don't know why they would do that, because they wouldn't know if a car was legally parked in the parking lot, because that's handled through the Village of Roselle. So either way, you can obtain parking at our train station and park there if you have a permit or a or you pay the daily fee, which you can pay.
Overnight.
Yep.
There 4 days in a row, not even.
Yeah, as long as you pay. There's no limitation to time of day, overnight, that as long as you pay, you should not be ticketed and you will not be towed. And you can handle all that online. We can talk more with you if you want about just kind of understanding how that permitting process works or the daily fee process works.
Yeah, and for clarity, it's on both sides of the track too.
Don't people code and then on the other hand, it's like you can't park on the street either.
Yeah.
Like, on the third day.
Yeah.
Not that you don't want to pay the parking or this, which have park.
Yeah.
You're racing to save the spots to rent them out. You know, so what do you do?
That's the case. I would just ask that maybe community development take a look at that, not to create a bigger issue for you, but if they're erasing ADA required spots, then that's a whole other concern. So maybe we just need to pay a visit and see what's going on. So, but we appreciate you raising your concerns and hopefully we were able to address some of those today. All right. Any other members of the public that wish to address the board at this time? Is there any other business for the board to discuss? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries.